The first time the HOA president threatened to fine me $450 a day for my unapproved fence, I almost laughed until I realized she was dead serious. What she didn't know, what she could have never imagined, was that her beloved clubhouse, her Olympic-size pool, her tennis courts, were all sitting on my land, illegally. And I had the contract to prove it. By the time she figured that out, her entire kingdom was already burning. I didn't plan on inheriting a war. I came back to Colorado for a funeral wearing a borrowed black suit and trying not to fall apart while they lowered my Uncle Raymond into the frozen ground. He was the closest thing I'd ever had to a father. Before he passed, he grabbed my wrist with what little strength he had left and whispered, "Don't let them take what's yours. Reed. Promise me." I promised, not knowing who they were or what they wanted. I found out fast. The ranch he left me was 847 acres of wind history and quiet. The kind of quiet that sits in your bones. Across County Road 47 was a different universe. Meadowbrook Hills, all manicured lawns and matching mailboxes, led by a woman who acted like she owned the whole county. Gwendolyn Sutherland. White Range Rover, sharp bob haircut, fired former county building inspector, HOA president for 12 years, a woman who lived for rules she invented herself. I didn't meet her first. My neighbor Sterling did. He rolled up in an old Ford, stepped out like his knees had stories, and introduced himself. "You met the HOA yet?" he asked. I shook my head. "Give it time. They'll find you." The way he said it made me uneasy, but it didn't register. I was still grieving, still trying to figure out how to live in a house that smelled like my uncle's old coffee. 3 days later, I understood exactly what he meant. A letter was tucked into my door, thick paper, fancy script, Meadowbrook Hills Community Association, a violation notice, a fine, 14 days to correct all deficiencies. My fence apparently failed to meet community aesthetic standards. My fence, on my ranch, outside their subdivision, outside their jurisdiction entirely. I called the number on the letter. Meadowbrook Hills Association. "This is President Gwendolyn Sutherland," she purred. "This ranch isn't in your HOA," I said. "You don't have authority here." A pause, then a tone colder than mountain steel. "Properties that border our community must meet our standards. I assume you want to be a good neighbor." I wanted to hang up. Instead, I said something like, "My family's been here since 1889. She didn't care. She hung up after repeating her deadline. That was the moment I felt the first spark of anger. But it didn't stay a spark. Within days, more violation letters showed up, claims about my truck being a commercial vehicle, about my pasture grass being unkempt. They stacked fines like firewood, $450 a day, $13,000 a month, on land they had zero control over. Sterling came back with a cardboard box full of his own battle scars, years of false violation, notices, harassment, and low-grade intimidation. "She tried this with your uncle," he said. He was too sick to fight. Something in me curled tight hearing that. The idea of this woman bullying a dying man, it made my blood run hot. So I dug into my uncle's files, old maps, tax documents, letters, handwritten notes, and then tucked away in a yellowed envelope I found the fuse that would burn her entire empire down. A lease, dated 1985. My uncle had leased 12 acres of our ranch to the future HOA for $1 a year, for 30 years. It expired in 2015, and if no new agreement was signed, the HOA was required by contract to either negotiate a new lease or remove all structures within 180 days. It had been 9 years. 9 years of trespassing, 9 years of clubhouse parties and tennis tournaments on land they no longer had permission to use, 9 years of my uncle being too old, too tired, too alone to fight back. My hands shook. From anger, from clarity, from the sudden realization that I wasn't dealing with a petty HOA president. I was dealing with someone who had built her power on hope and assumption and the silence of a dying man. The next day, the county inspector knocked on my door. They filed a sanitation complaint, he said, already exhausted. I showed him everything. He shook his head. "They're abusing the system. Document everything." I should have felt empowered. Instead, I spiraled. The online attacks started next. One of Gwendolyn's board members posted photos of my property, calling it a blight, accusing me of lowering home values. Hundreds chimed in. People in town stared at me like I was contagious. I commented once politely. They deleted it and blocked me. I remember sitting in my uncle's office late one night staring at that old lease, wondering if maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it wasn't worth it. Maybe the HOA really was too powerful, too entrenched, too connected. I felt myself slipping toward surrender, toward that cold place where you decide it's easier to bend than break. But then I saw my uncle's shaky handwriting in the margin of the lease they forgot. Don't let them forget. It snapped something back into place inside me. I found a real estate attorney, the only one in town who didn't flinch at the word HOA. Elise Waywright. Sharp eyes, quiet voice. The kind of calm that made you trust her instantly. She read every page, every scribbled note, every violation notice. When she finished, she said one sentence that changed everything. They're trespassing, Reed, and you have all the leverage. She drafted a cease and desist letter so clean, so lethal, it felt like holding a loaded weapon. The HOA had 14 days to meet with us. Instead, Gwendolyn called me screaming. "What do you think you're doing?" she snapped. "Protecting my land," I said. "This is extortion. This is contract law. You think you can win? You're one man. We're an entire community. Then I'll see your community in court." She went silent. Then she said, "Board meeting. Friday night. Be there." They packed the clubhouse, everyone glaring at me like I was a criminal. Gwendolyn grandstanded about outsiders and threats to community values, trying to whip the crowd into anger. And then Elise stepped up, calm, precise, unshakable. She explained the lease, the expiration, the trespassing, the 9 years of unauthorized use. You could hear the room change temperature. People shifted. Murmurs rose. Someone yelled, "Did the board know about this?" A retired attorney in the back asked the question that detonated the whole meeting. "Madam President, did you read the contract? Did you know the lease required written renewal?" Gwendolyn froze. Her eyes darted. And then, voice trembling, she admitted she'd known for 6 months. She'd found the contract and chose to ignore it. The room exploded, shouting, accusations, demands for resignation. I slipped out while chaos consumed her. The lawsuit was filed Monday morning. By Wednesday, the local paper had picked it up. By Friday, Gwendolyn was trending on Facebook for all the wrong reasons. When we finally stood before Judge Donovan, a woman with the patience of granite, the HOA's attorney tried every excuse imaginable. Tradition, implied consent, community needs. The judge cut him off. Where she asked is the written renewal of the lease. He had nothing. She hammered the gavel once hard enough to echo. The HOA will cease all use of the 12 disputed acres immediately. No clubhouse events, no pool access, no tennis, no programming, until this matter is resolved. Gasps, whispers, panic. For the first time, the HOA felt the weight of reality. And Gwendolyn, she looked like someone watching her kingdom crumble stone by stone. Her board forced an emergency vote. They removed her ally Morin, replaced half the leadership. She sold her Range Rover within a week and left town. When the new board finally sat down at Elise's conference table, they weren't arrogant. They weren't defensive. They were scared, humbled, ready to make this right. They offered a fair lease. They offered to pay my legal fees. They offered a public apology that didn't sugarcoat anything. And I surprisingly didn't want to destroy them. I could have demanded back rent, could have sunk them financially, but Sterling's words echoed in my head. Most folks either give in or burn everything down. You don't have to do either. So I didn't. I accepted the deal, signed the new lease, restored peace, real peace, not the silence created by intimidation. And the moment the paperwork was done, the moment the ink dried on a contract that should have been renewed 9 years earlier, I felt the weight lift. Not triumph, not celebration, just gravity releasing its grip. I left Elise's office, stepped into the sunlight, and finally understood what my uncle meant when he whispered his last request. Don't let them take what's yours. Not your land, not your dignity, not your voice, and absolutely not your right to stand your ground. Because bullies don't fall when you push back. They fall when you stop being afraid of them.